This video is not intended for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Seven Kinds of Mischief. I'm your host, Stone Loki. Tonight, this is going to be a little different. Our dear friend, my co-host on Thursday night, Adega Outlaw, is out for the night. So what we are going to do tonight is make this episode all about Adega. Brother, we love you. We can't wait for your return next week. I hope you are listening to this. Everyone, sit back, relax. Big thanks to Adega for allowing me to pull some of his content and to COAG for one very, very special video that I've got that I'm going to show tonight. Everyone have a great time, and I will be in chat with you.
Welcome. Today I am going to be sharing with you just a portion, a small chapter of a non-relevant section of the book Revolution. It's the second one in the Evolution series. It's chapter 17 called Dirty Secrets. Here we go. Galvanics Industries. Part of operating a business, at least a successful one, means taking risks now and then. Sometimes it's changing a tired and true product line or starting a new advertisement scheme. Other times, it's thinking outside of normalcy or beyond what is known or accepted. Galvanics was known for being just that type of company. They pushed the limits of what was acceptable on many occasions and were rewarded with lucrative contracts more often than not. Risk-taking businesses and money both draw certain types of people, and Galvanics was full of them. But among the trillions in the Union, a few were sick, diseased, or demented and could hide it, fit in, and mixed with the population. One such person made it into the company and gained some measure of authority. Jeffrey Rickton had been with Galvanics since his recruiting out of college. High IQ, abstract reasoning, and a work ethic was perfect for research and development. He quickly gained successes and brought in significant amounts of cash. People like that were rewarded in the smart companies. He gained power over facilities and funding. But there was more to Mr. Rickton. He was a psychopath. He had figured out a way to siphon small amounts of capital then turn it into a constant growing cash flow outside of the company's eyes. He used this to fund a private venture which involved going outside of normalcy to the bizarre and even subhuman domains. The universe was big. Many offshoots and small groups of people grew outside the reach of the Union. They had liked being far away and unseen. Some good, some bad. And Mr. Rickton used one such group to supply him with what he needed. Animals for grotesque experiments were used early on. But later, he called on one of those groups to supply him with the old, the sick, and the forgotten. Towards the time just before the war in the Union, he was using stolen or captured people from far outside the government census, even children. Mr. Rickton wanted to merge humans with machines. It was that same old song sung by inspired dementia. Making humans immortal and improving beyond normal limits. Long ago, artificial body parts had become perfected. It was nothing to grow or create new limbs or organs. Even parts of the brain could be artificially repaired. But Mr. Rickton was aiming for nanobot-controlled cell walls made of silica and graphite compounds with microcomputers all around the internal and external surfaces. Bodies filled with such cells could be programmed to do anything. He worked alone in evenings in a private lab, just like all the cliches of black and white movies. Bodies stacked up to be burned. Others half vivisected on walls or in tanks and still alive. Freebots that had been programmed for the work spun about, poking and prodding at all hours. On his walls were eyes of some of his victims still functioning by significant artificial enhancements. At times, even he wondered if it was for mankind or pleasure that he did his work. But he had a breakthrough. It wasn't what he was aiming to achieve, but it was an achievement just the same. He had been experimenting with cells using terahertz communications with other body parts, but switched to scale-art tech when the terahertz failed. A small girl who had gone insane from Mr. Rickton's work was the first. When he turned on the cellular communications network within the girl, she phased. She could move outside of normal space instantly. Mr. Rickton, from an adjacent room, saw on surveillance the little girl light up like a magnesium fire. It was then that she appeared and disappeared at different locations around the room. The poor, insane child kept reaching for things to play with and look at. Her mind was so fractured, and the flashing around the room overcame her feeble life support. Ending in death, she was free. The tech was astonishing. When Mr. Rickton presented his discovery to his superiors, he used a freebot instead of a human. The superiors went crazy over the prospects of all the new areas of transportation and delivery systems, although the military would benefit most of all. Mr. Rickton was hailed as a genius, given financial rewards and more autonomy. It was a good day for Galvanics. They never did ask questions about where the idea came from. Profit was king. Later in that month, Mr. Rickton tried the experiment again, but on a group of adults who still had their sanity. He succeeded in releasing 6 captives unwillingly. They escaped. Before they left, however, they destroyed all of Mr. Rickton's lab equipment, data, and even Mr. Rickton simply by touch. After leaving the room in a blistered and fractured mess, they flashed back through space to their homes in a far remote solar system. one day they might revisit the Union. Alright, this time I'm going to do something different. I'm going away from the books. This one actually was going to be the start of a book. It even has prologue of what I started here, but then I just decided to finish it up and leave it as it is. I am reworking the first ones that I removed from Evolution. I'm discovering more and more how to use the hit film, and it's going to be really good, but this here I'm just going to slap on real cheaply so it won't probably look very well, and I'm just going to do a straight reading through without any editing, so forgive me if it sounds a little odd, but yeah, like I said, this was going to be a scary one, so here we go. And I call this well, you could figure it out yourself. First there's light, then there's dark. Day followed by night, good pursued by evil. Healthy fights disease. The world, in fact the universe, fights opposites at every moment. Most are harmless, or even good, like awake and sleep. Both are bound together, and both serve to improve all things that dream. But opposites extend beyond the simple, easy lovelies of reality. It is one of those opposites that calls only seldom, only against the natural and completely unknown. For it's an opposite that survives in places that cannot be recorded. And yet I will try. My name doesn't matter. No one special, no one famous, and not particularly excited about the prospects of ever being known. But my name is very old, meaning valiant warrior. Nice, but only freedom fighters and those out to protect individual justice are the true valiant. The rest are deluding themselves. We all do from time to time, daydreaming of great deeds or conquering our devils, real or imaginary. It's just being human. But it has its utter opposite as well. The inhuman. Assassin fighting for no reason at all but to sow fear, pain, and death. I found one. Maybe more. It's just so far removed from rational reality to know for sure. I first met one as a child, asleep in my room, cozy and surrounded by loving family. I heard my name called out in a panic, fearful voice. Oh, I was brave then, rising from slumber to check the room, the hallways, and the house for anyone awake. Nope, all quiet and still. Even my father, whose voice it sounded like, was snoring logs the size of Texas. It happened twice more before I started to wonder, big thoughts for a 10-year-old. If no one was awake, who called and from where? Have you ever felt a shadow crawl across your skin? The cold and shiver-inducing gale from nowhere, headed to emptiness and only reveals itself to you. That's the very one that visited me. I was 10, brave and big in my own mind, so I nearly forgot about the meeting. A chance meeting, I think. When I was 16, I did the whole outdoors adventure stuff, from surfing to camping to diving deep into abandoned mines. They tell you those old mines were abandoned because the gold or silver ran out. I know better. It was here, in a desert mine, left quiet and still for nearly 100 years, when the door to the opposite opened again. I was still brave, at 16, and thought myself to be a man, a real man. venturing deep into forgotten tunnels all alone for the sheer joy of exploring the unknown. It must have been near a mile-long and twisted passage where I found the bones of a dog. I stopped and imagined how a coyote chased a rabbit, then got lost and died where my flashlight found it. But the truth was not so easy. Under the dog was at least 80 years of dirt, and under that was a man named Missing. I felt the shadow once again, only this time it shut my eyes, took power from my light, and induced delirium. But again, I was brave. I focused my mind, recalled my steps, and followed my instincts back to the fresh air and sunlight. I left that shadow deep in the underground, but this shadow doesn't understand our rules of distance, depth, or time. We would meet again. College found me and put me squarely in the health sciences. Sciences, do you still believe? Anyway, dissected anatomy with brain and bone, nerve and muscle splayed out in tanks, jars, under glass, surrounded my mind for memorization. Tuck these things into your head, let them rattle around, to never forget was the purpose of so many sacrificed at the altar of health. Learning from the dead to understand life only makes sense if you choose to be a proficient healer, which I had. Those labs smelled terribly, with formaldehyde and rotting fat. Oh, by the way, rotting human is the second worst smell you can experience. The first is if you take that unequaled and offensive sinus abuse and combine it to a foul. Just a tidbit for those who keep these little perversion treasures for whatever twisted reason you come up with. Meanwhile, back at the lab, I searched for a specimen submerged in a body tank sized, but they were all closed. I lifted the lid to several tanks, trying to find just the right set of misfortunes that would lead to my education. Guess who I found hiding? Yes, inside, smothering the corpse of a legless soldier, was an opposite enjoying the loss of bravery. It was fresh, and so was the Marine, with insignias tattooed brightly showing his type of service. It mustn't have been expecting life and nerve to disrupt its dance of victory, for when I opened the tank, both it and I were startled. My reaction was to jump backwards from the unexpected. It was to my assault, my subconscious, for I never slept well again. But I wasn't alone on the human side of the equation. Comrades, both male and female, were hit by the nasty shadow. I was the one who stood first, stood brave, and drove back into the tank. The Marine served us one last time by revealing his subskin anatomy, and I won. And later for me, many ticks of the clock, stacks of calendars, and days left in memory, but not later for that pesky, nasty shadow opposite. Time doesn't touch the untouchable, but it adds to things that touch me. Kids, grandchildren, beloved wife, friends, so many others joined to my life and existence, an experience that made me whole. But unbeknownst to me, it also made me vulnerable. Opposite came, found me in my health, my middle child's health, and potential loss of others. I didn't see him lurking there, but that's his gift and talent. He hides where no one thinks to look. My wife's nearly died, and Shadow took a piece of me. Child, too. Oh, that was a doozy. Spinning, falling, losing to fear. Then came my health, and I couldn't support those I hold dear. Shadow is at the door, not knocking, but sliding under, and coming through the floor. No hope for me now, just hanging on for a little more. Time is killing me. The dreaded tick-tock. Sanity fading in helplessness. I make mistakes now. Do I drive? Do I buy? Do I trust my own decisions? Maybe, maybe not. But the shadow still comes close. I see him at my feet, nibbling and grinding. I see his teeth now, face and flesh, the shadow that has hounded and hunted and finally found its quarry. Looking him in the face, I see him now, know him now, recognize him from days long ago. It never once left me, no, not a single tick or talk. Oh, what a fool I have been. The shadow is me, my hated and trusted self, but just a part, the part called pride.
No holiday for me, no. Projects to finish, designs to make, and Mr. Gilbert has to have his new steam engine design done on time. Yes. Always on me to fix, to make, to build. Oh, I have my vacation all designed, polished and planned out. You're too late to stop me. My beauty, my love is coming. Yes. Here we go. Time to close up your back panel, my dearest automaton. Look how beautiful you are. A face of porcelain and brass, eyes of agates, and the finest blonde hair I could find. Well, involuntarily remove. She was wasting her life anyway. She won't miss her hair at the bottom of the river. Now, my dearest, you're all wound up. Steam engine is lit and fully functional. Go, my wonderful creation. Make the city quiet. Give me the holiday I always wanted. It's time for you to kill them all. No bullets will stop you. No fire or hammer. Go, my automation lady. Go, my automaton lady of death. All my work is done. Go play. Play in the blood of humanity.
This one's kind of dark. I'm gonna read it directly from where I got it, something I've known about for a while, and I've done some investigation on it. Some of you people may have done some investigation on this as well. It's one of those things from back in World War II where we had some terrible people doing some terrible things, and this one actually happens to come from Russia. And in my investigation of this story, trying to find out if it's true or plausible, coming from, like I was telling Loki before, my scientific mind and my healthcare training, so I took it apart. I looked to see if the technology was available for the time. I looked to see if these type of people existed at the time, or in the place that they said, if everything was set up to where this could actually be true. Everything is very, very plausible, but there are strong arguments on both sides that say this isn't true, and there's strong arguments that say this is true. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to read this for you, and we'll get into Loki's a little later. But realize the possibility of this being an actual story exists. And for you people who are in England, I hope it really doesn't bother your sleep too much, because this one's pretty disturbing. So, if you guys have ever heard me do my readings from my book, I'm usually in the morning when I read it. My eyes are better, my voice is better. So forgive me if I stumble, but I'm going to do my best because this one's a little long, and bear with us. And to those people who said hi to me in chat, and to Loki, hello everybody. All right, here we go. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas based on stimulants. They were kept in an isolated environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so that the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so they had only a microphone and a 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized window into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on, but no bedding, running water and toilets, and enough dried food to last for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners, which we all know what that means, deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised, falsely, that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversation took on a darker aspect after 4 days mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and the events that led them to where they were, and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternating whispering to the microphones. And let me read that again. They stopped talking to each other and began alternating whispering to the microphones in the one-way mirrored porthole. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce an occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about his behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphone until the second and third captives started to scream. The two non-screaming captives took the books apart, smeared pages after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. Then the screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. After 3 more days passed, The researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure that they were working, since they thought it was impossible that no sound could be coming from the 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen that 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do to get the attention from their captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke a response from the captives that they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to the test microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you immediate freedom." I'll remind you, I'm just reading this the way it's written, sorry. To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice response. "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke out among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for their life, or the life of a loved one, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state that they were in as alive. The food rations past day 5 had not so much as been touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject, his thighs and chest, stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 of the surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of the flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that wounds were inflicted by hand, not by teeth, as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the positions and angles of the wounds indicated that most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the rib cage of all four test subjects had been removed. This is one of those places where I did a lot of thinking about my medical research and the stuff that I had learned. Under certain circumstances, people can survive with their organs outside of their body, but it has to be certain circumstances, and this is what they saw. While the heart and lungs and diaphragm remained in place, the skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing lungs through the rib cage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tracts of all 4 could be seen still working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of the days. Most of the soldiers were Russian specialist operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be let out of the chamber and immediately begged and demanded that the gas be turned back. The test subjects continued to scream and wanted the gas to be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed in the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. And I thought about that, and I'm thinking if their fingernails and their skin on their fingers had been removed down to the bone, it would be fairly easy for them to rip someone's throat out with their exposed bone. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives, if you count the ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of morphine and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one of the doctors. Okay, again, I gotta read this the way it's written. When Hart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out to the point there was no more air in his vessels. There was no more air in his vessel system. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach, and just repeated the words, "more," over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. Here's another one where I thought about having the heart stop. You can live without having that work if your brain has oxygen for 3 minutes, and it seemed like this is how it worked for this one. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begged for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back into his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative that they had given him to prepare him for surgery. He fought furiously against the restraints with the anesthetic gas, though the anesthetic gas was brought up to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through the 4-inch wide leather straps on one of his wrists, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier holding his wrist was there. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under. And the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that had died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had triple the normal amounts of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in his struggle to remain free from being subdued. Most of them were from the force of his own muscles that he exerted to set himself free. The second survivor had been the first of the group of the 5 to start screaming, his vocal cords destroyed. He was unable to beg or object to the surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested, reluctantly, they try the surgery without anesthetic. It did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of placing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should not be medically possible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting in the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes caught hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of a dramatic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so that the patient could write his message. It was simple. Keep cutting. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well. Although they had to be injected with a paralytic for during the operation, they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period. Sorry, my eyes are getting weak. And they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas. One of them responded, "I must remain awake." All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced and they were placed back into the chamber awaiting determination as to what they should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of the military benefactors for having failed their stated goals of the project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, an ex-KGB, instead saw potential. He wanted to see what would happen if they put them back in on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed into the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. An EEG, of course, is to measure brainwaves. That was another one of the things that I had to investigate to see if they had anything that was adequate for the time, and they did. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back into the gas. It was obvious that at this point all 3 were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all his might. First left, then right, then left again, for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired to the EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined unexpectedly. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the time and moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of a deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flat line as the one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber, with both subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew out his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to the bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. "I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you," he screamed at the man strapped at the table. "What are you?" he demanded. "I must know." The subject smiled. "Have you forgotten so easily?" the subject asked. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within all of you, beginning to be free at the very moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal heaven where we cannot tread. The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out. So nearly free. All right. Again, that one, we don't know if it's true or not. I've checked. I can't tell you if it's true or not, but it is awfully disturbing.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.